The end of Babylon 5 left a lot of unanswered questions, and the Telepath War was one of the biggest loose ends. But thanks to spin-offs, books, and unfilmed scripts, we can piece together a lot of what happened. Let me tell you the story of the fate of Bester, Garibaldi, Lyta, and the Telepaths.
And then you'll start a war between the Telepaths and normals. And in the end, Mr. Bester, you will lose.
We'll see.
Babylon 5 wrapped up on a countdown to conflict. Bester and the Psi Corps were more powerful than ever, and maneuvering for a takeover on Earth.
Remember, Byron.
Lyta and her telepath resistance, financed by Michael Garibaldi, were launching terrorist attacks on Psi Corps, all the while gathering their forces for a big push to take it down. So what happened? Well, Final Reckoning is a book set after the war. It's based on an outline by JMS and it's considered completely canonical. Crusade, the spin-off show, is also set after the fact. They don't cover all the details, but there's enough there to put it together.
In other news, ground was broken today in Earth Dome for a monument dedicated to the many who died in the recent telepath crisis, including...
The Telepath War wasn't a conflict of space battles between rival fleets or armies clashing on battlefields. Instead of war, everyone after the fact refers to it as the Telepath Crisis. The Psi Corps continued its gradual takeover of Earth's government by stealth.
We all thought Psi Corps was controlled by the government, but that's changing. The Corps is starting to pull the strings behind the scene. They're more powerful than you can begin to imagine.
They blackmail politicians, manipulate the minds of key decision makers, and get their own agents into positions of power. The Corps are getting close to what they want, but they face a major threat from the telepath resistance. This forces the Psi Corps to take more radical steps. Rogue telepaths had always been hunted down and sent to re-education camps, but in their desperation to crush dissent, the Psi Corps shift from reprogramming the rogues to killing them. In the trials that follow the war, we hear about how the crackdown intensified, and how the re-education camps became death camps. Soon normals opposed to the Psi Corps start being sent there too. When the dust settles, Bester and his inner circle are held responsible for the deaths of thousands.
We have struck deep at the resistance and captured most of their leaders.
We get one glimpse on screen of a pivotal moment in the conflict. There's an episode of Crusade where the Excalibur's resident telepath, Matheson, recalls his role in what happened.
This is a very special case.
A leader of the telepath resistance is captured and taken to the Psi Corps' secret command center. Matheson's job is to administer sleeper drugs to dull her powers. The Corps' main forces are away, conducting a raid that they think will be the killing blow to the resistance. But it turns out to be a trap.
We just had a report from the field. Our forces hit the main base for the resistance, but no one was there. It looks like it's been empty for days.
Then where are they?
Matheson is convinced not to give the injection, and the prisoner sends a telepathic signal to the resistance, revealing the base's location and opening the door to a decisive attack. In the original script, the resistance leader was originally supposed to be Lyta herself. What's more, Lennier is there fighting alongside her. This was a surprise to me, as I always figured he'd be wrapped back into the Centauri Prime stuff and redeem himself to Delenn somehow. Both Lennier and Lyta seemingly die in a huge explosion, sacrificing themselves to deliver the killing blow to the Psi Corps. While the actors weren't available for the episode, JMS confirmed that both characters died during the telepath crisis, so we can assume they met similar heroic deaths to what we saw here. The Final Reckoning book also references what is almost certainly the same incident from another perspective.
Some of the top people in the Corps are coming here to oversee the final stages of the war.
Bester and his top enforcers are lured into a trap, an explosion that resulted in nearly all their deaths. Bester senses Lyta's presence and barely escapes at the last second, but the damage is done. The Psi Corps is defeated and discredited. A new regime brings more freedom for telepaths. They now get to live relatively normal lives, so long as they check in regularly for a deep scan to ensure they aren't abusing their powers. But what about Bester? Well, he escaped justice. Earth's most notorious war criminal is on the run. He hides out in old safe houses on asteroids and remote colonies, always under assumed names. Bester evades capture for years. He's being chased by the reformed Psi Corps, but Bester can run rings around them. His real concern is Michael Garibaldi. Now, Garibaldi is now a corporate oligarch with unlimited resources, and his hit squads are forever just a few steps behind Bester. After years of fruitlessly chasing him, another man might have let this go, but not Garibaldi. In Babylon 5's later seasons, Bester kidnapped him, tortured him, and reprogrammed his mind. He quit his job, betrayed his friends, and was left to rebuild a shattered life.
Turn around.
He gets face to face with Bester again in Season 5, only to discover there's a block in his mind, preventing him from pulling the trigger.
How stupid do you think I am, anyway?
Bester can gloat, but he's unwittingly created a more formidable enemy than he realizes. Garibaldi seeks help from Lyta, maybe the only telepath strong enough to remove the block. In exchange, he funds and arms her resistance movement. But where do we go from there? Well, there was a short story published in Babylon 5 magazine called Nautilus Coil. It's set after Babylon 5 and before the Telepath War.
Those are level 12 blocks. Only a Psi Corps can put them in, or break them.
You can do it.
Here, Lyta convinces Garibaldi to join her on a dangerous mission to stop the Psi Corps getting its hands on a powerful weapon. In exchange, she removes the block. Garibaldi is now free to pursue his revenge. From here, we go back to Crusade. There's an unfilmed script that was written before the show got cancelled. They were super close to making it. They'd even paid Walter Koenig his money already. In this story, the crew encounter Bester hiding out on a remote colony. In exchange for his help, they agree to get him off-world to his next safe house. Matheson thinks Bester is a monster.
He ripped right through my brain. He got our destination, everything.
But over the course of the episode, he comes to recognize that his motives are complicated. That he felt he was doing the right thing to protect his people, in his own twisted way. This hints at Bester's complicated legacy that many telepaths are still grappling with, even years after the war. Later, we see Garibaldi's goons show up, always one step behind. And in the final scene, Bester gets picked up in hyperspace by a Psi Corps mothership. Now, we've seen this before. This secret military fleet was revealed in Babylon 5's 5th season.
It just sits here in hyperspace, for months at a time, ferrying missions back and forth, and waiting until we need it. Just like all the others.
And despite losing the Telepath War, it's still out there, and under Bester's control. This was clearly setting the stage for something later in Crusade's run. In the Final Reckoning book, one of Bester's contacts asks about the fleet, and he dodges the question, in a way that suggests it's not around anymore. This means that it was probably destroyed in some kind of confrontation involving the Excalibur crew, but nothing so grand and visible as another war, especially if Bester's own confidants don't know what happened to it. This takes us to around the year 2271. After more than a decade, Bester is tired of running, and goes to the last place anyone would expect. Earth. See, on a remote colony, you might be far from the authorities, but you can get noticed in a population of tens of thousands. On Earth, you're one among billions. He settles in Paris, and to even his own surprise, he builds a life there. The story has a lot of elements in common with the classic Michael Mann film Heat. Just like Bester, Robert De Niro's bank robber must always keep one step ahead of the law, and lives by a strict philosophy of self-preservation.
Don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner.
But this philosophy is challenged. Bester finds romance with a non-telepath woman. He finds himself a job writing scathing literary critiques in a local newspaper under a pen name.
For the love of God, Montresor.
Very fitting considering his love of literature and his love of scathing put-downs. And strangest of all, he begins to let go of the past. He moves beyond the bitterness over what was, and imagines a future living out this simple, normal life. But of course, the past catches up with him. The Psi Corps had always conducted experiments, searching for ways to make telepaths even more powerful. Bester was involved in one that went wrong, resulting in an incurable medical condition. Michael Garibaldi is still on the hunt, and he discovers that Bester needs regular doses of a very specific medication. He promptly buys the only company that makes it, and begins to track everyone who takes it. Bester realizes something is up, so he robs a supply of the drug from a pharmacy, and covers his tracks so it's not clear what was stolen. Garibaldi notices the news story, thinks briefly about investigating further, but moves on. Later, Bester is out and about in Paris when by chance he notices a face watching him from the crowd. An old comrade from the bad old days. He knows he's been recognized and he can't take any chances. Now, a dead war criminal or a pharmacy robbery alone mightn't draw attention, but both in the same city, that's enough to bring Mr. Garibaldi to Paris. But he still isn't certain. That is, until something is said by this local French detective he's working with. The Frenchman gets annoyed when Garibaldi refuses to reveal key information to him. I see how it is. It's on a need-to-know basis, and I don't need to know. Wait, say that again, says Garibaldi. Where did you hear that? I don't know. I think it was something the new critic in the paper wrote. He's got quite the poison pen.
That information is on a need-to-know basis, Commander. And you don't need to know.
The reliance on medication, the chance encounter with a former comrade, and his inability to resist a spiteful put-down. It's all come together to lead Garibaldi straight to Bester.
Maybe I'm just gonna have to explain it to you again!
But then, in typical Garibaldi fashion, he screws up. He gets in a tussle with a man in the street and ends up on live TV. What's the famous Michael Garibaldi doing in Paris? Bester sees him on TV and knows what he has to do. He mind wipes the lady he'd fallen for, destroys every memory she had of him. He hijacks a car at gunpoint and he flees. But again, Bester's own misdeeds come back to bite him. See, that block in Garibaldi's brain had been strong, so as the chief sees that car go by, he can feel his brain flinch. It's the remnants of the block reacting. He can sense Bester is there. What follows is a chase through Paris, culminating in a fistfight in a rain-soaked alleyway. Bester is hit by a sleeper dart, his powers are numbed, and Garibaldi is shot in the arm. It's a near-run thing, but Garibaldi gets the upper hand. He finally has Bester where he wants him. Many years ago, Bester had Garibaldi's life in his hands. Now the roles are reversed. And just as Bester spared his life, Garibaldi chooses not to pull the trigger. He realizes this isn't just about him. Others will want to see Bester get justice. What follows is the trial of the century. Bester takes the stand and is utterly unrepentant. He believes he did what he had to do, and the new regime for telepaths won't last. Now stuck in a jail cell for his remaining years, Bester lives out his worst nightmare. Permanently on sleepers, he lives as a mundane, stripped of his powers. He spends his time working on his memoirs, his version of history, justifying all his actions. Until one day, from the window of his cell, he sees a statue being erected. No doubt some hero of the resistance, Lyta or maybe Byron. What's revealed is a man and a woman with an infant child. Now, in the book Dark Genesis, we learn where Bester came from, his secret origin story. He was the child of two telepath resistance leaders. They were killed and he was taken in and raised by the Psi Corps, not knowing anything of his true heritage. In the next book, Deadly Relations, Bester tracks down a rogue telepath leader. The man knew his parents and recognizes him as the baby that was lost all those years ago. Bester can't accept this. Doing so would shatter his whole world. So he shoots the man, again and again and again. The incident leaves his hand twisted into a permanently clenched fist. Now an old man, Bester looks at the statue and finally accepts the truth of it. He smiles at the irony that they put up a monument to him without even knowing it. That night, he passes away in his sleep. The guards who discover him find his fist is finally unclenched, a sign he's finally found some kind of peace. So, what do you think? Did they do justice to Bester and the telepaths? Is this the TV movie that they should have made? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, I'll be seeing you.